Now, it's true that not long ago, you could drop out of high school and reasonably expect to find a blue-collar job that would pay the bills and help support your family. That's just not the case anymore. In recent years, the high school dropout has made on average about $10,000 less per year than a high school graduate.
Within Los Angeles, the academic achievement gap between Phineas Banning and Palos Verdes High School, represented by the disparity between the Academic Performance Index, state rank, student graduation rate, and their parents' graduation rate, appears to have a direct correlation with the income gap between Phineas Banning and Palos Verdes High School, represented by the median home prices of the surrounding area. The achievement gap is primarily the result of inadequate learning materials, unqualified teachers, lack of parental involvement, and language barriers. The low-end schools suffer from these issues, as well as overcrowded classrooms and substandard buildings, and then lack the necessary funds to remedy the issue.
Particularly in California, we have a significant issue because we have language issues, we have disparities in affluence, we have large urban areas which have historically had their own sets of interconnected problems. So it's a social issue that plays itself out in education.
One of the things that we know across the nation is that the level of social economic is tied, one of the biggest ties to the achievement gap and students' achievement levels. Students that find themselves in that position usually come to school with a difference in language, different in exposure, different in cultural backgrounds. When you look at our schools that serve high priority students, you see a large turnover in teachers. You see many inexperienced teachers that don't have the level of experience to deal with students.
The effect that academic achievement has on the income gap is evidenced by the $10,000 disparity between the average annual incomes of high school graduates and non-graduates. There is an even larger gap between the incomes of higher education level graduates and non-high school level graduates. Over the last decade, this income gap has been perpetuated and has even grown slightly. The Gini index is a measure of income disparity, 0 being completely equal distribution of wealth, 1 being completely unequal. On a national scale, the Gini index has been increasing since the 1950s, steadily rising above that of most other developed countries. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, under President Bush, enacted a standards-based education reform. The act requires that 95% of students in the state reach a state-designated standard in reading and math by 2014. Critics of the act discuss how standardized testing may fail to test necessary skills in students, how schools are held to a high level of performance and may not be given the necessary monetary tools to achieve them, and how states may create intentionally low standards in order to maintain their funding.
I would not reauthorize No Child Left Behind without some fundamental changes. And I'll focus on a couple. Number one, I think the assessment tools that we're using to measure annual yearly progress are inadequate.
It brought a sense of understanding what accountability needed to look like, but it is an unfunded mandate. And therefore, there are mandates in it that say you're going to close the achievement gap, but there's no funding that comes along with that. There are issues in terms of testing, and it's a one-size-fits-all kind of testing. So to judge a school's just by a single test, that's not a real good way of looking at what are the structures, and then teachers end up teaching the test.
President Obama's race to the top entails a competitive funding program. States propose systems of reform that work individually to close the achievement gap in each state. The federal government then grades the propositions, granting funding to the winners of the competition. Critics of this program discuss how competitive funding may punish schools that are not fortunate enough to win, how schools with the greatest need may be discarded in favor of those with good propositions, and how the winners may be chosen arbitrarily through inadequate criteria.
But a lot of that funding is competitive funding, and when you have competitive, that means some win and some lose. And I think that you have to look at some formula funding so that you can absolutely address some of the schools that have the largest needs in other ways. I think all of our kids need to be lucky. They all need to have, fantastic teachers and administrators and leaders, and really that cultivate some of the things that maybe they have not been exposed to that really would master them. As a student that came from the inner city, I know it's possible, and I know that we can do it.